Hi there beautiful souls, Avalon here, and today I get to do a much requested video. Yay, I'm finally sitting down to do a video, and I'm really excited about this one because a heap of people have asked me to do it, and that is my top picks for tarot and oracle decks that are suitable for shadow work. Now, I have kept my selection small, and I've also kept it quite broad, and the reason for this is because some of the decks that I have here in my list of recommendations can be quite confronting as far as images go, and I realize that for those who cannot get comfortable with those kinds of images, who find them way too confronting, you won't get what you need to get. You won't get any benefit out of working with them because you will be somewhat closed off to them. So I feel that while a deck should be rather confronting in a way, should push you a little bit out of your comfort zone, should make you think and feel, I think that if a deck is too in your face, you just can't get past that, and it's not going to be of benefit to you in the long run. So I've tried to keep it quite broad here. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hook right in because I'm going to try and explain the reasons why I've chosen each individual deck, and so that you can get an understanding of what I mean and why it is that I've chosen the decks that I've chosen. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to speak very fast because I do have, I think, around 11 decks here to show you. So I haven't got them in any particular order. I'm just going to pick up the ones that are around me at any random time and start with that. The first deck that I'm going to show you is Soul Cards 1. Now, as you'll know, I do have Soul Cards 2 as well, but I haven't worked with Soul Cards 2 to the degree that I've worked with Soul Cards 1, and so I cannot yet recommend that, although just from face value, awesome deck, totally recommend it, off the side, you know, off record. So Soul Cards 1. This is one deck that is amazing. The images are confronting, I will say that, but they are very beautiful and they do evoke a rather strong emotive response. Now, the beauty of this deck and the reason why I've chosen it is because this deck, I should say, is devoid. The cards are devoid of keywords. They have no numbers. They have no book to tell you exactly what the meaning is behind each individual card. And that is a beautiful thing in itself because it gets the individual relying on their intuition. And for me personally, and you know, just from what I know and what I understand of other people, there can be quite a fracture between an individual and their intuition. I know that there are many people who still to this day as adults fail to rely on their intuition in the same way that I personally rely on my intuition, and that's a terrible shame. And that is something that is a shadow in itself, and it can come from, you know, a deep dark place like your childhood. I didn't mean dark, but a deep place as you know, as in your childhood, you know, where you perhaps have been in one of those situations where you've been told to suppress that aspect of yourself, to that you were too imaginative, that you were too fantastical, you know, that you were childish or silly or whatever it is, if you did voice aspects of that spiritual, intuitive nature. And so this deck is one that really gets you relying on those intuitive faculties. It really gets you confident in that arena. It gets you to explore these independent reasonings because you need to understand why it is that you've given these cards the meanings, or this card, one of these cards, for instance, a meaning that you have given it. And that meaning might change depending on the circumstance, the situation, the day, the person that you're reading for, or if you're reading for yourself, because only you can really tell, you know, what that card means in that moment, and you need to be able to rely on that and understand where that meaning and that reasoning is actually coming from. And that's beautiful, beautiful work. If you can manage to mend that rift between your intuition, your intuitive self, and your spiritual self and your physical self, then holy doolies, the kind of work that you'll be able to do, the kinds of success and the kinds of harmony that you'll be able to achieve is absolutely brilliant, because your intuition is a huge rudder in your life. It is a huge compass. It is a point of orientation, and if that's out, then you might find yourself a little bit lost. So Soul Cards 1, definitely soulful in your work that you need to do. Definitely a beautiful deck. The images, like I said, they can be a little bit confronting if you're not really into it. If you can't vibe with this, that is okay. I have other decks as well, but if you do, if you can get over your issues with this deck, I think that you'll find that they are absolutely phenomenal for this type of work. So, just showed you a few there. Like I said, in no particular order, the next deck that I'm reaching for here needs no introduction. It is known by many, loved by many, and utilized by many for this very reason, and that is, can you guess? From the backing, from the beautiful red rose in the back, that is the iconic deck by the lovely Ian Daniels. I had a mind blank then. Yes, Ian Daniels, Tarot of the Vampire. This is one of those decks. This is a tarot deck. This is one of those decks that is highly sensual, deeply dark. It's alluring, it's fantastical, and it gets your mind thinking. It doesn't necessarily follow the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith structure. Oh, that's a beautiful card, isn't it? It really does get you to reach into aspects of yourself and pull out a little bit of that darker aspect, and gets you to work, you know, with the theme and the underlying energy of this particular deck. This is a beautiful deck, but it's one where I find that I have been approached by many a person asking me if it's worthwhile spending the money on it, because they have found that the images are rather too confronting. Now, I will say this. For me personally, this is fantasy art. Now, my husband and I, we have a difference of opinion when it comes to horror. He thinks, for instance, that movies like Underworld and Blade, etc., are horror movies, whereas I personally view those movies as fantasy, and I don't find horror in them at all. So this is one of those decks where I just see fantasy art. I don't see horror, whereas other people do. They look at these cards and they do feel horror. And if you are one of those people, that's okay. If you feel that you can't work with this deck because of the confronting nature of the imagery, that is okay. Don't feel like you need to push yourself past your comfort zone, well past your comfort zone, and sit in a place of discomfort while you're trying to do an already uncomfortable task. Shadow work can be quite heavy, it can be quite full on, and the last thing that you need is extra pressure when it comes to, you know, a deck to work with to help you transition into this arena of work and to help you navigate your shadows. Like I said in the beginning, it should provoke a response, but if you can't get over that initial reaction, then this is perhaps not the deck for you. But if you can, this is a beautiful deck. It is one hell of a deck. The images are just are so provocative. And then the best thing about this deck, hands down, is the companion book, Phantasmagoria, which we all know and love. And I've said this before, as I've spoken about this deck before, this is a standalone resource, Ian Daniels' Phantasmagoria. Now, the way the book itself is laid out, each section will give you an intro, the alchemy, the kindred spirit of the card. It will give you the essence of the card, so a ton of keywords and associated phrases to go with each individual image. It will give you the message. It will give you an analysis of the symbolism as well, so that you understand exactly where the artist is coming from, and it gets you to look at these elements from a much closer perspective. And then it'll give you the shadow aspect, and the shadow aspect is perhaps one of the most important parts of these cards if you're doing this kind of work, because it gets you to look at the undercurrent of a situation. Many meanings in oracle and tarot decks are the surface meaning, and there is always so much more to it, and you need to be able to push the boundaries to get to that so much more juicy undercurrent section, and read between the lines when it comes to meanings, and of course make them mean something to you. You need to be able to tailor make a card so that it does have a meaning, a profound meaning to you while you're doing this work. And the more information that you have to go on, I should say, the better understanding you'll have of that initial meaning. Whereas some of the other decks that I've got here, they're rather light. They don't go into as much detail as Ian Daniels has with his Tarot of the Vampires, but you do need to do a little bit of digging, and you do need to do a little bit of consolidating as far as meanings go, and you do need to look at things between the lines and so on and so forth. So Phantasmagoria, Ian Daniels, absolutely beautiful. The deck itself is a Llewellyn published deck. The card stock is not that great. It's not terrible. Well, it's very flimsy. So yeah, just keep that in mind. The book itself is amazing, and you can actually get this this tarot deck as an app as well with the full book to go with it. So if you're interested in just the book itself, I'm sure you'll be able to download the app and actually get to that resource. So I'm going to put these off to one side. Actually, I should put it back in its baggie. It deserves a little a little bit of love in that way. Okay, so the next deck that I'm going to choose here is one that I think is really quite quirky. And this is The Deviant Moon by Patrick Valenza. And this is the borderless edition because let's face it, if you had the opportunity to buy a deck without a border, why wouldn't you? This is a tarot deck as well. And the cards are quite long. The cardstock itself is pretty good. It's not too bad at all. And the theme of this particular deck is like a dark carnival. It's like the shadow aspect of the moon. Now, because the moon, this is the backing of the deck, because the moon really governs intuition, it is linked to the feminine divine, and it's linked to mystery and mystique. It has so many folkloric tales attached to it, some that are deep and dark, and some that are, you know, much more well known, like the werewolf howling at the full moon, transformation, madness, etc. This deck is one that explores all of those themes in a rather comical way. It's kind of like dark comedy, but it's still comedy in its own way, and it does get you to look at things in a more lateral, rather obscure kind of kaleidoscope way, like you're gazing through a fractured looking glass, and picking themes that you see, you know, to help you get over certain shadow aspects. And yeah, this is just a really unique deck, and it does open up, you know, the door to a little bit of shadow work, and it's not too confronting as far as I'm concerned. Some might find it way too confronting, but for me it's not too confronting. It's got a comical edge, it's got quite an obscure, you know, really out there energy to it. For me, I just find this deck really funny, really intriguing. For others, they can find it rather disturbing. So it's up to you where you sit as far as your response to this particular deck. It does follow a bit of a loose Rider-Waite Smith system as far as symbolism goes, here and there, but for most part it's kept quite unique, and that's the beauty of this particular deck. So and of course, like I said, it contains that lunar aspect, and it really does get you thinking outside of the box and exploring themes that are a little bit more out there, a little bit more left of center. So I'm just going to tuck this one back. Beautiful. Alrighty. The next deck that I've got is as well a tarot deck, and this is the Wildwood Tarot by Mark Ryan, John Matthews, and the illustration is by Will Worthington. I've actually reviewed this deck on my channel before, and so I'll link that review in the description bar of this video so that you understand a bit more in depth about this deck. Now, this is a deeply pagan deck. This is a deeply wild and raw and unbridled kind of energy as far as the deck goes. And the reason why I've chosen this particular deck in my recommendations is because this explores the wild side, the wild man and the wild woman, and for many people consolidating that archetype within themselves can be quite difficult. Learning to throw caution to the wind, dance proudly naked under a full moon, that kind of thing. This deck is great for that kind of work. It's great for bridging the gap between you and your primal self. It gets you looking at aspects of who you are from a very, very raw sense, and it gets you repairing some of those fractures that you might have with that archetype or that aspect of yourself in a very open and straightforward way. This is a no bullshit kind of a deck. It comes straightforward. It's everything out in the open. It's, you know, it's a really beautiful raw deck. It has a lot of animal themes in this particular deck, and that in itself brings through that animalistic quality to the energy of this particular deck. And the book itself, the book is beautiful, and it's, I want to tell you that it's 160 pages. Now it's organized, well, not necessarily organized. It has a seasonal aspect. It has the pagan wheel of the year. This is a very pagan deck. It has the pagan wheel of the year. So if you find yourself in a seasonal rhythm or working rhythmically within each season, and that you yourself and your spiritual self really respond quite interestingly as far as the seasons go, quite strongly as far as the seasons go, then this might be a deck for you, because it does mention that. It does mention the aspects of the wheel of the year, and when a card appears, what aspect of the wheel of the year does that card find itself in, and that in itself can be quite interesting if you're looking at doing pagan work, spiritual work, and you are one of those people that really find a rhythm within the seasons. So that is the Wildwood Tarot. Very, very cool deck. One of my absolute favorites. I just love it for many, 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 many reasons, and so will you. The card stock's not that great, but which is a shame, but the deck itself is actually really beautiful. The next deck that I'm going to show you might actually be really surprising, but it is the Victorian Wisdom, or the Vintage Wisdom Oracle, sorry. It has Victorian themes in it, or a Victorian theme in it, but it's the Vintage Wisdom Oracle by Victoria Mosley. It is published by US Game Systems. It has a little guidebook. The guidebook itself is 79 pages. So beautifully written, so humble in her approach, Victoria Mosley, that I really enjoy it. She's not pompous, she's not arrogant, she just delivers her messages in a really straightforward, open way, and she very much says that, you know, this is just her perspective of the meanings. If you find something else or another meaning to associate with a particular card, then to go with that particular meaning, and that's comforting. This is the backing of the deck. The cardstock is very, very good. It's probably not as good as, say, the Blue Angel, but it's still good, it's still sturdy, it's still up there, and the box itself is sturdy. So the very first card is the Shadow Self, and the reason why I've chosen this deck is because of the themes that you'll find. Release, such an important theme when you're looking at shadows. You're integrating, you're releasing things from yourself. Harmony, like the harmony that you'll find through shadow integration. Innocence, for some people they have issues in areas of, their childhood, having their innocence robbed in some way. That can be a really strong and underlying theme for a lot of people. Trust, let's face it, who doesn't have trust issues? Wisdom, learning to govern the waters and utilizing your wisdom, your cultivated wisdom to do that. Union, learning to celebrate and bring together, fragments of yourself. Truth, getting to the bottom of things, really uncovering shadows. Celebration, giving yourself a pat on the back when you finally have done the kind of work that you need to do. I mean, this Strength is the other card. I mean, I could go on and on. This card has beautiful, beautiful themes, and it's one of the softer decks that I would recommend for shadow work. It does have, like I said, a beautiful, beautiful messages, beautiful themes, and it presents those themes in a really gentle way. Still a very straightforward, very, very warm way, but in a much more gentle way than, say, Soul Cards or Tarot of the Vampires. This is probably a deck for those who find those particular decks or other decks too confronting, too disturbing for whatever reason. The Vintage Wisdom Oracle is a great all-rounder. It has great themes, very approachable. It's kind of like a really knowledgeable grandmother that tells you like it is, gives you a bit of tough love, but also gives you a cuddle when you've actually succeeded in the work that you've needed to do. So it's got a really warm kind of energy, very tangible energy. The next deck that I'm going to show you is, again, a little bit on the lighter side, and you might be surprised with this one, and that is the Steampunk Tarot by Barbara Moore. And the artwork is by, I can never remember his name, so sorry to the author, Ali Fell, that's right, Ali Fell. This has a great guidebook to go with it, which I'll show you. This is the backing of the deck. This is a Llewellyn deck. Card work quite shitty, similar to that of Tarot of the Vampires, but hey, the deck itself is beautiful. It has a steampunk theme to it. It does follow a Rider-Waite-Smith structure, and for that reason it can be a very reliable deck if you're familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith. Especially if you're new to tarot, for instance, or partway through your journey with tarot. This is a really reliable deck. It reads beautifully, and you can have confidence that it's going to give you what you need in the time that you need it. Now, the reason why I've introduced this deck or included this deck in this particular list is because it has a sense of adventure and an underlying realism to it. I want to show you a card that I feel is just absolutely just real as real. Not that one necessarily, but like I said, it has a sense of adventure, and for a lot of people, embracing adventure can actually be a shadow. Learning to let go, to be spontaneous, to loosen the reins of control, to not try and govern every aspect of their life, that to a point where it really sucks the magic and the spontaneity and the free flow of the energy that exists in their life. For many people that can be a theme, that can be an actual issue. So learning to throw caution to the wind, to really embrace the opportunities as they appear, to be spontaneous, to be ready to leave at the drop of a hat, can actually be quite an underlying dream of many people, at least friends of mine. When I say many people, I'm talking about people that I know, obviously. I'm not talking about a generality here. Show you these images, but I'm really looking for a card that I just thought was hilarious. Well, this is not hilarious, but the Five of Pentacles is actually really beautiful in this deck. It's one of my favorite images. It really showcases that being left out in the cold, and the many other associations that comes with the Five of Pentacles. But my favorite card, of course, I bet you it's going to be the very last one, because I'm really looking for it. Oh, come on. Third last. This one here, liquor. It's the Five of Cups. Sorry, I had a bit of technical difficulty there. I actually bumped something on my keyboard. So where was I? I had the Five of Cups. And this card came to me with the message of hangover. It also brought to me introduced to me the concept that the Five of Cups can actually mean nausea, and it can actually be related to pregnancy in many cases and morning sickness. And it really did teach me a few things, and that's the reason why this deck is so special to me. But the themes, like I said, it's adventure, it's embracing adventure, it's embracing the mechanics behind things and how they work. The constant appearance of cogs and machinery, or a machine-like essence to this deck, gets you to look at things in a very literal sense as well. So you can read these cards in a very literal sense. What you see is what you get quite often when it comes to your work with this particular deck. Now, the book is quite chunky. Very cool book. Nice big representations of each card. And that's across the board. It doesn't change for the minors. The book itself, it's got a few spreads, of course, because Barbara Moore's a bit of a legend like that. It has 294 pages, not including the last couple of pages of propaganda. And so standard size cards, so on and so forth, and a really cool deck to use. And again, one that has softer imagery. So if you are one of those people that find Soul Cards or Tarot of the Vampires, or even Deviant Moon too confronting, then you can rely on the Vintage Wisdom, or if you're interested in a tarot, the Steampunk Tarot. So the next deck that I'm going to show you is an Oracle deck, and it is one by Lucy Cavendish and Jasmine Beckett-Griffith. It is the Les Vampires, or Les Vampires Oracle. And of course, this one does... It has, quite dark themes, but the book is written in a way that gets you to look at the beauty and the message and the benefit of these dark characters that appear, and gets you to understand that within your shadow there is something to be gained. There is a softness and a wisdom and an essence that can really teach you something about yourself, and as such should be celebrated. Nice big cards. Beautiful theme in itself, And but for those who again find this kind of imagery really too confronting, then like I said, there are others. There are other more more appropriate decks. But the images are beautiful. The eyes really capture you. The themes, such as this one, transmission, resurrection, enlightenment, eternal youth, burnt by the sun. I mean, you could really read things into this particular deck. Burnt by the sun, looking at the sun from a masculine point of view. If you view the sun as masculine, the moon feminine, burnt by the sun could mean a female or a male being burnt by a lover, by a masculine presence in their life. Eternal youth, someone who's struggling with age and deteriorating youth. Enlightenment, bringing about things into the light, understanding the basic nature of your shadows. Resurrection, bringing out into the light an essence of yours that has been long and since buried, something that is beneficial to your shadow work, something that will help you to navigate those shadowy waters. Transmission, learning to discuss aspects where they're needed, learning to bring to fruition, or bring it, not to fruition, but learning to bring about a sense of harmony in just talking about aspects of your shadow, if you feel that that be a thing. Rebellion, letting loose, setting free. Past as a prison. I mean, need I say more? This has some great themes that will help you to explore aspects of your shadow, and as such, it made my list of recommendations. Now, Lucy Cavendish also and Jasmine McGiffert have also got the Shapeshifters Oracle, the Oracle of Shadows and Light, and they are, again, decks that I don't have them present here, but they are very, very good for shadow work. Now, some of you may know how I feel about deck combining, and I have in the past combined this deck with the other two that I've just mentioned, the Shapeshifters and Shadows and Light. And together they make one super, super big deck, and they're great. It's great for shadow work. So if you wanted to do that, there is an option. The reason why I didn't mention the other ones is because I've talked about them a lot before. A lot of other people speak about those decks, and I just wanted to use the Lay Vampire in truth too, because I watched a recent a recent reading video by Lucy Cavendish, the writer of the book, the author of the book, and she was using the Lay Vampire Oracle, and the way she read that deck is just, it just had me. I'm just like, oh my god, I need to get that deck. And then I realized, oh my god, I actually have that deck. So it put it in the forefront of my mind. The next deck that I'm about to show you is again another oracle, one that's very recent. It is the Sacred Rebels Oracle by Alana Fairchild, and the artwork is by Autumn Sky Morrison. This is a deck that explores aspects of the sacred feminine. This is the triple aspect in the background. You have Maiden, Mother, Crone. And it has some beautiful, beautiful images. So if you are looking at exploring aspects of shadow that really encroach on your femininity, your connection to the feminine divine, embracing certain feminine archetypes, and so on and so forth. And this is for men as well as women, because we have masculine within feminine and feminine within masculine. So this is a deck that can be utilized for both genders, you know, during this kind of work. So this, you know, helps you to navigate those waters. And explore facets of that feminine divine in your relationship with the feminine divine, and any fractures that you might have with the feminine divine. That's actually a really beautiful deck. In fact, I used this deck when I first got it for my husband, and he was going through a bit of a phase where things were shifting in his life, and he drew this one, Restore and Replenish, at the same time that he was looking at going on a yoga retreat and a massive cleanse. And it was just, you know, such beautiful what do you call it, confirmation that where he was headed and the work that he was intending on doing was actually really good work. So he in himself was actually doing a little bit of shadow work right there. And the images within this deck is absolutely beautiful. I've shown this deck once before. I think I actually did an unboxing of it. I think I've done an unboxing about, you know, almost every one of my decks. But really, really beautiful cards, really beautiful messages. Be the hunted, not the hunter. Be the hunter, not the hunted, I should say. This one here, the perfection of your life. dream a beautiful dream, come to life. These are all themes that you could apply to shadow work. Oh, the next one, shock of the new. That's actually a really beautiful image. So this is a really beautiful deck, very soft, very gentle. It's got a strong feminine energy to it. Like I've said, it is no bullshit. It is straight down the line. It's you know, it's going to shock you with truth. You know, it's going to hit you with it. You know, straight up. It's not going to mollycoddle you. It's not going to nurture you in that way. It's going to tell you what you need to know. It's going to push you to the limits, tell you what you need to know, and when you finally uncover it, it will be there to give you a bit of a pat on the back, but it's going to be a pretty freaking hard pat on the back. Like I said, it's a ballsy kind of a deck. The next deck that I have for you is one of those decks that people find really confronting. Hang on, I'm just going to pull a couple of cards out. It is the Mary L. or the Mary L. Tarot, and it is by Schiffer Publishing. The cardstock is phenomenal. The deck itself is amazing. This is a mind-blowing deck, and this is my personal top pick for shadow work. This is the deck that I utilize when I want to push myself out of my comfort zone, where I want to uncover some shadows, when I need to go there, you know, when I need to do that kind of work. This is a super serious deck. This is a deck for big girls and boys, you know. You can't be immature when you're looking at this particular deck. It has a lot of nudity. It you know, it has aspects of hermaphrodites and you know, naked flesh and body, and some really harsh imagery as well. It's very, very in your face, and it's very raw and unbridled, and that's the kind of essence that I need when I'm doing my shadow work, because I'm quite I'm not really a soft, gentle petal, so I need something a little bit harder to get me to where I need to go as far as shadow work goes. So the Mari L. Absolutely enticingly beautiful. It has this raw energy. It's a very, very mysterious energy. It's confronting, it's real, but it's an amalgamation of what is real and what is fantasy, and it, you know, it twists it all into this you know, supernatural energy. Many people love this deck, and there's a reason for it. Is because it does provoke a response. Look at that. It provokes a really, really strong response, and it gets you to look at things in a much more obscure, much deeper sort of a way. It does not follow the Rider-Waite-Smith structure, and therefore you need to work with this deck in a different way. The meanings for the Rider-Waite-Smith, I find they don't fit as well with this deck. They do fit to a degree, but they don't fit as well. You need to sort of sit down and work with this deck and find your own meanings. And again, it's kind of intuitive. It pulls a little bit of that energy from the soul cards in that way. It has a great guidebook with it. I'll show you in a minute. But like I said, the images are really confronting. They can actually be too shocking for people. And if that is the case, that actually reminds me of the wolf in the Never-Ending Story. Sorry, bit of a random thought there. And so it's a very, very beautiful deck, and you know, it's so triggering. Perhaps the word that I've been needing to use is trigger, because it's really, it triggers aspects. It gets you to really examine closely aspects of yourself, and that can be a really uncomfortable thing initially, until you understand the benefits that can come from, you know, pushing yourself that far. There's so much benefit to doing shadow work, so much. I highly recommend it. I like to do it around this time of the year. This is why I'm doing this video, because it is we're edging into winter. We're in the autumn phase. This is the book that comes with it. the Mary L Tarot. It's called Landscapes of the Abyss, and you do feel like you are literally walking through landscapes of the abyss when you're journeying with this particular deck. The author is Mari White. It has quite a bit of information for each of the cards. She looks at things from a very individual point of view, a very individual perspective. This is not a writer clone by any stretch of the imagination, so keeping that in mind, the Mary L Tarot is definitely one of my picks. Another pick is Tarot of the Hidden Realm. This is the backing of it, by Barbara Moore and Julia Jeffries. Julia Jeffries did the artwork for this particular deck. This has a fae theme to it. It has been described as a very facey deck, and I would agree, it brings you up close and personal. It does not have the Rider-Waite-Smith symbolism in this particular deck, and that's okay because she takes you into a different direction. Look at that one. And, you know, and that's all right. Oops, upside down. I've obviously been using this for readings. For those of you who are attuned to the energy of the Fae, you will find that this is a deck for you. It's neither soft nor harsh. It is truthful, it is honest, it has an energy that will take you on a journey with an outcome that is, it's just super interesting. I can't really find the word to describe it, but when I work with this deck in a you know, a shadow aspect way, I'm always really surprised at what comes out, and I'm surprised and I'm not surprised. It kind of brings into light things that I always knew were there, but it shines a spotlight on it, and it gets you looking at things practically, and it gets you to finally reconcile aspects of yourself, you know, to cut the bullshit, to pull off the rose-colored glasses, and to, you know, to examine things for what they truly are. Because this has an element of the hidden realm attached to it, and the intro in the book, I don't have it here with me at the moment, it's on my bookshelf. It's a standard Llewellyn book. It's similar to that of, the layout is similar to that of the Steampunk Tarot, but because it examines aspects of the hidden realm, it gets you to pull apart those curtains to see what's really going on behind, and it gets you to invite the energy of the Fae into your life to help you work through your shadows, so that you feel like you're not necessarily like walking this path alone. Now the thing is, for many people who haven't worked with the Fae yet, their energy can be really quite intense. It's not the Tinkerbell kind of energy that some might be expecting. It can be much more confronting, it can be much more serious, it can be much more wild, much more in your face. And so this deck is one of those decks that can really serve as a great rudder, a really good compass point for you in your shadow work, and it can lead you down the path if you so choose to walk that particular path. So beautiful deck. And in fact, I'm about to confess something here. The Tarot of the Hidden Realm has my heart. I love many of my tarot. I love all of my tarot decks with the exception of the Mystic Dreamer. I've spoken about that before. I love all of my decks, but I have the most special place in my heart for this one, and I can't articulate why. Maybe it is because of the Fae energy, but when I look at this deck, I just want to know everything about it. I am charmed by it, and I think that is that Fae energy that Julia Jeffries has managed to capture beautifully. So that says a lot about the artwork. Now, oh gosh, the last deck or selection is actually two decks combined, but because I always have these decks combined, I consider them one deck. But they are the Goddess and Sirens and the Gods and Titans. Find the backing of the Goddess and Sirens. There we go. Now, of course, for those who aren't familiar with this deck, and I don't know anyone that really wouldn't be, this deck explores divinity, the masculine and feminine aspects of divinity. And we're looking at some big, ballsy kinds of archetypes, people that have graced the pages of ancient history, modern history, or whatever. And not so much modern history, more ancient history and myth even, and legend. You know, we're looking at that kind of energy. We're looking at those archetypes in a really close and personal point of view, and we're inviting them to have a look at our lives. So these carry with them some really in-your-face themes, and they have some really interesting lessons to actually teach. The reason why I have them combined is because I believe that that brings a better balance through to them, because at times I feel like I need a bit more of a masculine you know, kind of shove, and sometimes I need a bit more of a feminine kind of shove. But there are a few decks, in my opinion, that capture the masculine divine in the same way as this deck does. Jimmy Manton does excellent work here. Jimmy Manton does the artwork, and I'll start to show you some. Dionysus, Ecstasy, Bam, Beauty, Bridget, Healing, Newt, Expansiveness, the Valkyries, Redemption, Freya, Irresistibility, Morgan Le Fay, Magic, Katesh, Pleasure, Vesta, Home, Vulcan, Inventiveness. You know, these are things that you can actually apply to your life, to your aspects of shadow work, to aspects of your shadow work. And they get you looking at archetypes within yourself and areas that you might find fragments or fractures, I should say, especially if you're an ultra feminine woman that has lost touch with her masculine, those masculine archetypes in her life, or if you're a man that is ultra feminine and has lost touch with the masculine aspects of your life, or perhaps you're a man that is ultra masculine and you've lost touch with the feminine aspects of your life. You know, there is something in here for everyone, and it really does, it doesn't just heal that gender area, the area of gender like I've just described now. It does way more than that, because each individual archetype governs a specific feeling and a specific energy within your life. And so it's much, much more than that, and it gets you to go deeper. You know, you might have a fracture as a woman. You might have a fracture within that sensual side of you, where you fail to embrace the sensual nature of yourself, or this can apply for a man as well. And perhaps you need a little bit of Aphrodite energy in your life, or a little bit of Dionysus energy in your life, to help you to navigate those waters and to bring about a sense of integration to that fracture in your life, and to make you much more whole. These things might seem foolish. Why would one want to repair a fracture with their sensual self? But your sensual self is an equally as important archetype as your healer self, or your truthful or justifying self, you know, and so on and so forth, you know. So each aspect, each archetype is deeply important to each individual. And so if you find that you have a fractured relationship with one of the archetypes, then you might find that this deck is actually great for you to seek to repair that. I'm a bit tired, and I find myself rambling quite a bit there. So I think I could have gone on. There were way more decks. I really wanted to choose a heap of different decks for you, but unfortunately I'm going to leave it at that, because this has been a really long video. So if you have any questions, queries, if you'd like to add anything, then by all means do so. Just keep in mind, I've kept the selection of decks quite small. I do have many, many others that I could have chosen for this, but for right now, I think I've chosen something for everyone. So much love, many blessings. Let me know what you think. Thumbs up. Thanks. Bye.